we think inside of a box. For instance, if I'm talking about energy, I tend to think of, well, I do something here, generate power, force, energy, and it travels along this wire or through this mechanism, and the energy is transferred to producing heat or producing a message at your end or doing something. In other words, the energy that comes out that's needed at the other end had to go in from this end. Now, that's not true in much of our experience, if you think about it. I want to pick up something that's too heavy for me. I say to this chap beside me, who's stronger than me, could you pick that up for me? He receives the message, and in consequence, he picks up the weight. It's not the energy that he uses, he's using on site from himself, his own body. It's not my energy. I've used a tiny amount of energy in saying, could you pick it up for me? Would you be so kind? And he's willing to, and he does. But the energy he uses to pick it up is not the energy I have to put in. I only had to put in enough to ask him. He puts in enough to actually do it. In other words, I can be the cause at a distance of something happening. Obviously, I phone up a friend in New York and he posts a letter to me or something. Do you see? I'm not putting in the energy of him posting the letter, only the phoning him up to New York. So, with our purchase of power from the grid, we pay for a certain amount of energy. We use that energy, which is going to be used up in the use that I put that energy to. Not entirely. I can receive a very small amount of energy that charges my phone. I then use the phone to ask something or other for someone to send me a book, and they post a book to me. Or they post an item to me in the post, hairdryer, whatever it is. They use the energy at their end to perform what I've initiated at my end, but I've not sent the energy from me. I've just sent the request and used up a tiny amount of energy in making that request. In other words, what I'm saying is that the effective power from the generating board of charging my phone, which is minimal, of course, tiny, compared to the amount of power that's going to be used somewhere in the world to achieve something that I want. I don't have to send the energy there. You say, yes, but you do have to pay the guy. Well, I might have to pay the guy, I might not. It might be, my brother there who sends it to me. I don't have a brother, but who sends it to me. I don't have to, oh, no, I'll send it. Yeah, I'll send it to you. Right, mate, do that. Do you see? Now, if it's the case that the lightning travels because there's a field force effect in a field, force changes in a field such that the lightning travels down through the plasma in the atmosphere, whatever it is, and you get the flash and the bang and so forth, and you get a release of energy, and the energy may have been transferred not so much in the lightning zigzag itself, but in that entire field round it. Okay, what we're saying there is that the force itself may be transmitted in this way. I'm not sure whether I'm saying it's through the field or is the field. And what occurred to me just before I said that was there's a third option, and that is that the field is simply there and communicates in this way. Now, it may communicate by literally carrying a correspondence between the energy put in and the energy released at the other end, minus some dispersion because of, random factors. So there might be some energy loss going on. Or it may be that it simply is a change. Can you imagine that I initiate something that changes or pulses the energy field, but the whole of the field moves at once? It's not a reaction that has to pass through the field. Can you get your head around that? I almost want to say something more than instantaneous. That it's the nature of the field that something all happens at once. Now hold that possibility for a moment and now say, and there could also be a facility or a characteristic of that field that can transfer energy in the sense that we have conceptualized it. Namely, I put in a certain amount of effort at one end and I receive out a corresponding amount of effort at the other end. There might be some dissipation, some loss, but basically, in everyday terms, then it's something that it's a medium in which there are instantaneous characteristics across it, more than instantaneous, but also affords the possibility of transferring energy in such instantaneous medium. A sort of example I would like to give is supposing the brain takes a certain amount of energy to think a thought, and it uses an equivalent amount of energy to receive a thought. I can transfer that thought with its energy put in by me, and you receive the thought with the energy to receive it. Or it may simply trigger in your mind the release of energy from the body and so on, necessary to receive the thought, which again could be more or less than the energy I'm sending. But I don't need to send the energy. I could just ask you to close the door in the living room, and because you receive the thought, you go and do it and expend the energy from your own supply of energy in your body. Now, with some receptors, namely human receptor, that's what I can do. With non-human receptors, like causing your electric fire to generate heat, I have to supply direct the energy. I can do that by using force fields, something that generates power, convert it to electricity, send it down the wire to your fire, you switch it on, and I'll put in the energy and you will receive the effect of it. I thought I was sending the power down the wire, but apparently the power's coming through the force fields around it. The effect of the force fields changing as I agitate these electrons in the wire. The electrons cause or have a demand on the force fields. The electrons agitating, not necessarily moving through the wire, but they have an effect on the force fields which is proportional to the amount of effort I put into agitating the electrons, and you can get out assuming there's not too many leakages and wastages going on, such that you receive the energy through the force fields, changing relative to something else, and you produce the heat in the fire. There's a one-to-one sort of relationship between what I put in and what you get out, minus leakages. Resistance in the wire and whatever resistance might be in force fields in the environment they're in. Perhaps interruption of other force fields cutting across it even. Another point I want to raise is that when you, for instance, for argument's sake, take the example, you burn fuel in your car and it chucks out carbon dioxide and a few other waste materials. If you took the stuff that it throws out, the burnt fuel, carbon dioxide and impurities, as we could think of them, they still are matter, some form or another. And matter made up of, atomic forces and so on, still has embodied in it an enormous power, way beyond what you have used in transferring, in translating the carbon fuel into carbon dioxide and energy. Just like the sun gives off amazing amount of light, which is tremendous energy for us here, but is minuscule compared to the mass of the sun and for how long it's going to last, even at the rate it's chucking up all this light. So what I'm saying is that matter is an enormous store of energy compared to extremely marginal stuff that we're using from it in translating it from one form to another, like, carbon to carbon dioxide, and taking a tiny bit of energy off from the so much so that the weight of the material, the volume of the material hasn't really changed, but the sun is getting lighter by about 10,000 tons per minute or something, for the next n billion years. It's possibly receiving more waste from the universe than it's chucking out in light. Something like that. So one can think of matter as being incredible concentrations of energy, like the sun, compared to the energy that it's giving off, like its light and heat. The energy and light and heat coming off the sun is enormous, but absolutely nothing compared to the amount of light and heat it can produce for the next n billion years put together. Well, it's n billion times that, you see what I mean? And that matter is like that, and you can cause matter to shed a bit of its energy according to changes in force fields. Now, I haven't explained why the force fields might be such that a change is instantaneous across the whole field. Or perhaps not, perhaps literally instantaneous, but it's still an instant, a nanosecond or part measurement, something utterly tiny, the equivalent of the effect travelling across the entire range of the field, travelling at, argument's sake, 1 trillion times faster than the speed of light. Matter may be constrained in how fast you can accelerate it to what level, but that's because matter is an incredible concentration of whatever force field is made up of. Now, I'm still thinking in terms of the field itself as being made up of something. In other words, a sort of a microscopic view of quantum. Infinitely smaller view than even quantum physics has. What I'm saying is then that the composition of the atom is something much, much smaller than we have been imagining. And we thought the atom was pretty small and its particles, the electron and so on. But we're talking about something far, 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 far smaller than the electron. Perhaps. I don't mean I've understood it. I just mean that we shouldn't have stopped at the atom, and then we didn't. We stopped at the nucleus, protons, neutrons, and electrons, and then we stopped now at the particle level. And I'm saying no. There's always another boundary. And perhaps that's the astonishing thing. There will still be another boundary after that, and after that, etc. We're only going to the stage of what we can codify and rationalize and cope with and find useful to us. And then with experience in that level, we start to extend just that shade further out. And so it goes on and on. So now we think, well, the mind might be basically something to do with, or the evidence of the mind seems to be thoughts, and thoughts might be something that at least are transferred through or even stored in fields. Or field activity. So when I think of something in Europe, someone else thinks of it in America too, because we're sort of in tune with each other. We've both been fed with the same background science and knowledge, and we're thinking even in the same areas anyway. And we are in tune with and calling out from some, if you like, universal mind. Akashic record or mind of God, but it doesn't matter what you want to call it, but something universal about the mind, and that the head, the brain is the great sensitive organism that can tap into this receiver and transmitter, so we can pick up other thoughts. And, people that are close to each other, they are thinking of each other on the same day. And, Mum's phoned. I was thinking of you. Oh, God, that's funny. I was thinking of you this morning. Oh, lovely, you phoned. I don't want to admit it. I haven't thought of you for months. Well, perhaps not that situation. You're more likely to have these coincidences if you do think of each other more often, obviously, by definition. But Einstein struggling away with something and just goes to bed, but when he wakes up in the morning, I've got it, it's so and so. Suddenly you get and you get this flash of enlightenment when actually not when you're laying awake all night trying to think of the solution. You don't get anywhere in the morning. Usually you've still not got the solution. But if somehow you can just shelve it and go to sleep, and you wake up in the morning and think, I know, wonder if it's so-and-so. Let's check it out. You get what we call intuition. What does prayer do now? What does visualization do, where you constantly think of a thing? Do you cause certain things to happen elsewhere that start to increase the probability of, at least, of you getting something like what you're imagining. Of course, in a very literal way, of course, I mean, if I think hard enough about how to do this, I'll come up with a solution. Obviously, my imagination is very constructive in that sense, because when I come up with a solution, I then go and try it and do it, and wow, it worked. Of course, I come at it from another direction. I say, oh, no, the whole thing is mind. I can't tell the difference between a dream when I'm really in it, for real, not half semi-conscious and semi-unconscious. I can't tell the difference between reality and this reality, except this is the reality I keep returning to. And if I kept returning to two realities, well, I would take them both as reality, I guess, if I keep returning to them. Reality is the dream that I keep returning to, but I won't return to it forever, And when I do return to it, it keeps changing, The house is getting older every day. Everything is changing. The garden's growing and it looks different fractionally every moment. Fractionally it's changing. Everything is changing. But I keep returning to something that looks like a continuity of what I'm familiar with. And some dreams I repeat often, and they're a bit sort of disturbing. Oh no, not that dream again. Dear. Perhaps this is telling me something I'm stressed about so-and-so, and it keeps appearing in the, I'm on a bus in a town I don't know, and I don't know where the bus is going, and I can't communicate somehow with people that do know that can link up where we are with where I'm from. How's that for summarising Marshall's, perhaps all of our dilemma for all of us? To what extent are we finding confirmation, support and harmony between what we understand as the reality and the reality that other people are holding? I'm going to take a break there. Thank you, Dad. Hey, look, picking up at about 6 minutes 50 seconds through this. If I pick something up, all of the something moves at once. It's not that the end I'm lifting moves first and then the rest of it does. At least superficially, the whole of the plank of wood lifts. There might be some bending going on, some delay, Or if it's a rigid bar, the whole of the bar lifts at once. This is harder to achieve if the object is extremely long. Let's supposing it's a mile long and I lift one end. There's a tendency for it to bend and not the whole of the bar to move. But do you see, rigidity is the quality of instant communication throughout. I want to say more than instant. I think I'll say the word corresponding. Synchronistic happens at the same moment. That's what rigidity is about. Now, these force fields may have the quality of rigidity. You would think this is extremely unlikely because a force field seems to be more tenuous than anything we could imagine, and therefore not able to hold together. But if we're thinking of tensile strength, something heavy like steel, as strong as aluminium, given its mass. And what I'm saying, therefore, is that density itself is not a correspondence to rigidity and integrity. Now, the notion, let me really stretch the thing here, of God is that he's absolute integrity. In some sense. And therefore, all of him is united at once, instantly. It doesn't take time for part of him to catch up with another part. He is what integrity is. And without it, there can be no creation. In other words, I'm saying that a fundamental characteristic of all things has to be an integrity, or they don't exist. They can only exist to the extent that they are some modification of that integrity. They can only come into existence if they are transitory, and that means they've come from a chaos into an integrity. But I think I want to say, but even for the chaos to exist, the chaos must have an integrity about it. You know, when I say God takes nothing, not even nothing, I mean that, the not even nothing. Because nothing has to have an integrity, a consistency of absence. But God has an integrity that includes both being and not being, and can take the being part and build a reality, as we call it. But that reality is his creation. I think I want to say something like it's the possibility of something that makes it possible. That sounds like an appalling truism. Let me think of this a bit closer. Something like the random, both being and not being, gives the possibility of the coincidence of a lot of being temporarily. And it is that which we see as transitory life, because it is transitory in that it can vanish again. I don't know. But if we're talking about the manifest is going to rely on some fundamental integrity. The cause of which we haven't yet successfully imagined, usefully anyway, imagined too well. But seems to be necessary to explain what we experience. What we take as empty space, the void, doesn't seem to be so empty, and it may have an astonishing, rigid integrity. That we haven't bargained for, but which is necessary to certainly consciousness, and possibly and life, therefore. And energy transference as we see it. That phenomenon, these phenomena, in fact all the phenomena that we seem to encounter. Wow. Thank you, Dad. And just to make sure I didn't miss it, a comment, I want to emphasize the fact that I'm saying that these force fields could be utterly rigid, so that you lift one end of the bar and the whole bar moves together. Do you see? Not that it takes time for my lifting this end to travel along to the other end. I'm saying that a feature of these fields could be an utter rigidity. And a difference in fields where they interact with other fields is therefore also instantaneous. That a field affects another field synchronously. Can you take that word? Can I coin that if it doesn't exist? It happens throughout at exactly the same time. Okay. If it's not infinitely rigid, then there is a time delay. But perhaps down to nanoseconds, or even smaller, whatever. I don't know what it means, okay? That if this is the nature of these fields, then we can explain the effect being synchronistic. Not even as slow as instantaneous. And that the notion of God is that he is utterly integrity, if you like. He's utter integrity. There's no shadow of bending in that sense. In other ways, of course, that's the last of the God that we want. We want a God that's alive and can respond to our requests, and does respond. You know, people that don't respond to our needs and requests are pretty frightening. So you could say our God, ideally, from our point of view, combines some moderation of this integrity, but has a wonderful integrity anyway. Very reliable. And I'm saying something about another characteristic feature of these fields is that they take no time to adjust. That's going to be tricky. Everything takes time, surely, Marshall. It might be smaller and smaller, but I can, to all intents and purposes, then, let me assume, switch from one field to another instantly, which is not quite as fast as synchronicity. Thank you, Dad. another comment this time from about 8 minutes something through this recording. It occurs to me listening to it. What makes you do it the other end? I could pay you, or I could call on a relationship. One human to another, I need this help. Or the chap beside me, could you pick this up for me? I can't lift it. Oh, yes, okay, mate. And he picks it up. What's the force field that's active? Well, it's a bit more elusive than you thought, you know. It's a relationship of love. Fellow human being asks, I don't need to do it. I can't see any benefit to me unless he's going to pay me. But, oh, poor old chap, I'll pick it up for him. Yes, mate. Yeah. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Do you see? What was the force field? It was a relationship of love, or compassion, or understanding, or kindness, or something good anyway. It was good from my point of view. It was good from his too. I know it was, because he was willing to do it. And as I sort of cornered him socially, he had to help this poor old man, and he was much rather wanting to rush off to his weightlifting or whatever it was. Do you see? Love has this amazing characteristic, and the derivatives of love, like compassion, and if I can call them derivatives, you know, the other things that go with it, that you will respond with your local energy and resources to do something I request. Why would you do that? Well, perhaps there's something about what we call society and community that there's tremendous payoff from doing this, in that you get the help of everybody else as well. They think, oh my goodness, this chap's helpful. What about where it can't be repaid? Oh, I still get a tremendous lift. And what does it mean that there's these activities in my society where the poor who can't help themselves are still helped, the handicapped and so on? Oh, it takes such a weight off my mind. I know that now if the worst happens to me, society, my culture, my friends, my loved ones will come to my aid and help me. How lovely. Can I join this club? Oh, certainly. Sign up here. All you have to do is have a reputation for being kind, keeping your word where you should, in terms of this culture. Ah, how wonderful. Yes, it's called civilization. There's all sorts of degrees of it. Some, quote, civilization aren't too civilized, but we can see the ideal, can't we? Yes. Now, do you see, we're now starting to say that the foundational integrity of the universe could be something to do with quite extraordinary force fields from our everyday mundane point of view, but somehow not so bizarre, not so alien. That love is in some sense a tremendous force holding society together. And hence, you know, I might want to argue, if you destroy the family, you may destroy the essential love relationship that's giving you the integrity of your society, and society collapses. It's not that you'll be able to be some master controller of it and be able to mine it for all it's worth, or control it in your ideal of the utopia. It collapses. because the love relationship perhaps depends on a familial, individualistic love and kindness received as a little child. That's the Jesus teaching. Except you receive the kingdom of heaven as a little child, you can in no wise enter in. And everybody thinks, oh, well, that means we've got to be childlike. Yes. But how about the other interpretation that's also there in the ambiguity? If you don't know love as a child in the family, do you really have a way of substituting this in your society? And presumably you'll want a better substitute, not a poorer one. You see all sorts of faults in the way families are the thing that we're relying on for this love relationship. That perhaps is the basic integrity, foundation of your society. Well, you have to make sure then that you have a substitute for building a love field, relationship, force that's greater. And it's not going to be through rigidity and fear and control. That seems to kill the life and the trust and the love. You get compliance until there's a chink in your armour, and then you get a bomb in the post or a knife in the back. And it's usually from one of your closest followers who has the same view of seizing utopia as you had. That's not good. My dear friend, you do not want that. That's a nightmare. It's a nightmare that gives you Stalin, Hitler, and Saddam Hussein's life, and many, many, many others that have gone before. It's the very foundation of Machiavelli's book, The Prince, and it's the prince of this world. And this world, remember, is not heaven. It's this great mixture of good and evil that you might learn to reject the evil and embrace the good. For your life eternal turns upon that. This is life eternal, to know thee, the only true God, the incarnation of your true values that you find ultimately are what you have for life eternal. It's not rocket science. It's pretty obvious. Thank you, Dad. Goodness, if you want Einstein, if you want inspiration as opposed to, well, what I may not have achieved in this recording, you Google Einstein's letter to his daughter. And this was to be read after his death. Wow, you will never see Einstein in the same light again. Bless him and bless you. Thank you, Dad.